Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dragon Prince video. This one is going to be my review of this book here, which is The Dragon Prince, Callum's Spellbook. So this is actually the first ever book released for The Dragon Prince. It's one of the first pieces of merchandise that's been released. I think for The Dragon Prince so far, 3 seasons in, we've only had I think some Funko Pops released, and then a lot of the sort of standard merchandise that you get of t-shirts and stuff like that that are available in some places. But this is the first, I suppose, proper mass market piece of merchandise that seems to fit with what the idea for The Dragon Prince was from the start, which was, as far as I was aware, from when Wonderstorm as a company was set up, the idea was that it was always going to be very heavy into the cross-media storytelling. So they were going to have comics, books, the series, of course, on Netflix, video games, all telling stories within the same universe and all linking and coming together. We hadn't seen that in the first 3 seasons because the story was literally just the first 3 seasons. So this is the first time we have a book to sort of add anything officially, in a way, to the universe. And while it does that to a certain degree, it is still a little bit recappy of the first 3 seasons. So let's get into this. So what type of book is this? Like it says here, it's Callum's Spellbook. So the idea is that this is meant to be an in-universe artifact. That it's literally the idea that you are reading Callum's notebook that he did his drawings in initially earlier in his life, and it was getting information about Xadia and Spellbook and putting it in here. So it's written from the character's perspective, Callum primarily, but the other characters write a little bit as well. So it's a very similar style of book to stuff that you've seen before in other franchises. So, stuff like the Jedi Path for Star Wars, where it's a textbook for the Jedi and you have Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon writing in it. For Avatar, of course, you have both the newer style of books, say this one, as well as Legacy of the Fire Nation, where it's a journal, in this case written by Korra to kind of help other avatars in the future. That again is recappy, but is meant to be written from her perspective. And the same applies for the older style book that we got from a few years ago, Lost Scrolls, which again is roughly the same thing, if not done quite as well. And then more recently, kind of similar style of show for Netflix, Voltron. We have both the Paladin and the Paladin Handbook and the Voltron Coalition Handbook, which again were meant to be sort of journal style things, put together with comments from the different characters. So that's what this book is. I'm just giving you a quick kind of flick through. You can sort of get a sense for it there of okay, fact files on the characters written by the other characters and stuff like that. They recap some of the stuff. Here's a page where Ezra explains, in his own words, how he actually talks to animals. Later on in the book, you do get some fact file pages about the dragons of Xadia, the different types of magic and so on. There's sun and earth magic. So they touch on some stuff that hasn't been covered so far. And definitely once the book gets to the stuff that is Xadia focused, it's a lot more interesting. Whereas the stuff from basically covering the first 2 seasons is fairly self-explanatory because it's all the stuff we already know about. Everything that is said here about Harrow, Sarai, Rayla, Ezra, and Callum, it's stuff we already know. So the more interesting stuff is the world building stuff they get to later on, when Callum is giving his thoughts on dragons, the different types of magic, the different places they've been, and so on. So overall, I think it's a very good book, and I definitely would recommend getting it because, it's a nicely sized book. It's 160 pages long, full cover, lots of great art in it, and some of the text is pretty interesting. It's only, like it says on the back here, $10 US, £7.99 in the UK, and that's about what I paid in euros for the book. I think it was more kind of 11, 12 euro, which is perfectly fine for, like I said, full color book. Covers a lot of information as you go through it, covering all parts of the first 2 and a bit seasons, which is probably, I think, the biggest criticism of this book is that they're extremely and oddly vague about when this book is set. It doesn't cover all 3 seasons. They touch on elements of season 3, and they go quite in depth on them in terms of some of the screenshots that they show. but they don't go all out, which I find to be very, very weird. And it leads me to believe that this book is written as if it's set like in the middle of season 3, because you have the page where it covers like Zubeia, who is of course the Dragon Queen. That's the aim of the first 3 seasons of the show, is to get Zim back to her. And they have the page covering her, but we only meet her in season 3. And at the end of the page it says, "I just hope we get to her in time." So because of other stuff that they talk about here, of like, they address like Janai and Amaya actually having a little bit of a dynamic going on. They address stuff like, you know, Callum going to like Rayla's hometown and stuff like that, the Silver Grove, which is stuff that happens in like season 3. But they don't address like key elements. Like, nothing in the book in any way teases the idea that Callum and Rayla are romantically involved, that they're in a relationship, or that there's any sense that he likes her or she likes him. Like, it's very weird that there's that dynamic, that it's even on the page where it's about Rayla. Yes, Callum praises her, but there's nothing that you'd read into it that gives you the idea that like he's super attracted to her or anything like that. So that feels a bit weird to me. That they leave out stuff like that. They have they show a screenshot later on of the flashback that we get towards the end of season 3 of Rayla's parents, like guarding the dragon egg, of course, the dragon prince, which again we only saw in season 3. So clearly they had access to most of that information when this book was being put together, but they didn't commit to it all. So it gives me the impression that like this book was arguably meant to come out maybe a few months ago and only cover the first 2 seasons, but they decided to maybe like expand it to include a little bit more, and then they just ended up releasing it in this sort of weird state where it covers like, you know, 2.5 seasons rather than 3. And it just leaves some of the stuff feeling very unsatisfying, in that, you know, Callum is referring to stuff that happens right up until this point, yet we as the audience know exactly what happens next. That we know Zim is brought back to Zubeia, so why write the book set to release like 5 months after the season 3 and tease this sense of like what's going on? Because we pretty much know going into season 4 that we're probably going to change up some stuff, because the roadmap that we got for the Dragon Prince was that the first 3 seasons are grouped together as being just the Dragon Prince. Seasons 4 and 5, book 4 and 5, Earth, and I can't remember the other one, but book 4 is meant to be Earth. They're meant to be grouped under the sort of tagline, the Dragon Prince, and it will have a subtitle, book 4 and book 5. And then when we go into book 6, 7, and 8, I think is what's confirmed, that will have a different title altogether. They seem to tease that it won't be the Dragon Prince anymore. It'll be called something different, which gives me the impression that we're probably going to be doing some sort of a time jump between season 3 and 4, which I think would make sense. And then we were probably doing an even bigger time jump between seasons 5 and 6, if we're going to be shifting the title that much. Because of course, the Dragon Prince isn't going to be true for the entire series. At some point, Zim is going to be the king of the dragons, so the title of the sort of franchise right now isn't going to make a ton of sense. So, you know, there's that. So, that's why I think it feels weird that, like, this franchise, this company, the way they had set it up to have everything come together and link together, why release it with the way the timing works, referencing so much of season 3 but not including all of season 3? It just makes some of the book feel very odd to me. So let's get into more specifics on the book. So like I said, it's called the Callum's Spellbook, and it's really nicely put together. Like I said, you know, you can see at the start, the first page, you know, it's a letter from Harrow to Callum saying that, you know, he basically, I'm giving you this book. That's why Callum's writing isn't so great here, because it's a very young Callum writing his name there. And then you can see the table of contents here, what the sections are, how it all started, just the 5 of us, the human world, the kingdom of Catalyst, my family, Lord Viren and his family, the other human kingdoms, more people and places like Catalis, Zadia, Elves of Zadia, Creatures of Zadia, Dragons of Zadia, magic, primal magic using dark magic, and from darkness to light. Like I said, 160 pages, and we cover a decent amount of ground, which I quite like. And you can see the way it's put together. There's text, and then it also features a lot of the sketchbook images that we see if you watch the credits of the episodes of The Dragon Prince. They always include, well, if you watch the credits, a bunch of different images that sort of relate to the characters from that episode that you can actually read a little bit into because they're sort of canon images from like the characters' pasts and so on. So a lot of that is included here, which I actually really do appreciate. That's definitely one of the big positives in this book, is that while some of the text is very just skippable because it's very recappy, it's a good book to look through just because of, it includes screenshots from the show, and then like there are pages like this one where like, okay, it's just screenshots, not a lot else going on here. But you do then get those moments where it does feature sort of new art, like even just this page. Along the top you can see the staff, which is very cool. Then you get like this really cool page, like the map of the world, which you see like bits and pieces of in the show, but it's nice to have just it to refer to here, like a reference book, and like, oh look, there's all the human kingdoms there. This is where they are in relation to each other. This is how the map is split in two between Zadia and Catalis and so on. Very, very, cool stuff. And then, like I said, more of this sort of sketchbook stuff with the idea that it is actually Callum who has drawn those images from his journey. And like you see them go on of like as it goes from him mainly sketching himself and the other characters to switching to it being more him taking like notes on spells, Zadia, and stuff like that. The book features like fact file pages like this is the one about Callum himself, and it features like what his role is, strengths and special skills, what their accessories are, and then what their likes and dislikes are. And of course it's very in character and like fun in that like Callum about himself is like likes dusty old books, the rain, made up words such as breakfunch, which is much funnier to say than just brunch. And he says dislikes, posing too long for official portraits, finding jelly tart crumbs in my bed that didn't come from me, and then just stuff like, he's not good at doing all this prince sword fighting and horse riding stuff, but he does like magic and drawing. Similarly, you have Ezran's page here, and it gets across some of like what's going on here. And again, like they talk here about like, but now I've seen how brave and wise he can be. If anyone deserves the throne, it's him. But then they never once referenced the fact that like in season 3, which they reference occasionally, Ezran is on the throne for a certain amount of time. It's just like, okay. It just feels a little weird about like what they do and do not leave out. And this is where like the first section's fairly like, they get through the stuff fairly quickly. Like here's a whole page on that weird dance that of course Callum does at one point, the jerk face dance. There's a couple of pages here on bait, of course, as we sort of start off with. There's this fact file page, and then you get a page covering all the different colors that he sort of transforms into. Here's the page on Rayla, of course. And they get across some of the stuff about elves. There's a page on her butterfly blades, which is fairly cool. I especially like the stuff along the bottom here as they sort of really like design engineering style show you how it works, with the idea of that like, you open up the two parts of the handle, and as they come together, the blade sort of springs out. You don't really see it that well in the animation, but they get across the point here fairly well. Page on human Rayla, of course, and like her famous quotes that she uses to, of course, get across that she's a human. And Callum in the drawings along the bottom is him being an Earthblood elf, which again is a season 3 reference, but like they don't cover it that well. There's pages like this where it's more of a recap of like the story more than anything else. Here's the page on Zim, which is pretty cool. Yeah, then they get into like the human realms, Catalis. There's the page about King Harrow, of course, pretty cool. And yeah, just, some nice, images, sketches as we go through it. There's a section on the castle itself. page on Sarai, of course. I was interested when going through this of like Callum talking about his family, like would there be any insight into like Callum's father? You know, of course, Harrow's his stepfather. But no, they don't really, you know, mention it at all. They do double down on the whole idea of like, oh, it was this secret of Harrow giving the cube, the what was it called, the key of Aravos to Callum. That they do make a big point about that here, about the secret, and like, oh, did Harrow know something specifically to why Callum would be particularly suited to hold on to that cube, and not like Ezran. So there's moments like that where it's like, oh cool, yeah, let's not forget that the cube, which mainly serves the purpose of pointing out to us what type of magic something is, actually has these other elements to it. You know, Amaya gets a page, of course, which is pretty cool. And then like there's a moment here where in the dislike section it has elves, but then it's scribbled out by Amaya, and then there's a comment here from her. I'm strong enough to admit mistakes, and I was wrong to think that all elves are bad. In fact, some are rather good, ... obviously referring to Janai. And of course with her you get a page on sign language and stuff like that, so it's pretty cool, kind of interactive. There's a little bit of a thing where like they write out like a sentence in sign language and they have you use the previous page to see what it says. Specifically what this one translates to is that love is magic is what it says. Yeah, and then you get some of the more minor characters like Gren, Opeli, Corvus, Lord Viren, of course. And again with him, they talk about him in a way where it's like, okay, they're not aware that he's like full complete villain yet, so it's like, again, not really referencing season 3, but kind of. The same with Claudia to a degree. It's like, okay, she's doing some bad stuff, but not entirely the way she was in season 3. And then like there's a kind of love letter that Callum wrote to Claudia when he was younger. And then like there's some cute, you know, things there. Like there's Claudia and Callum when they were younger. So it's just very fun to just see the mix of art, and then when there is interesting text, it does actually come together pretty well. Page on Soren, the other human kingdoms, so like it goes through like Durin and the leaders and so on. It's fairly cool. Like if you weren't able to catch some of the names that they didn't mention too much in the show, this is a very good sort of companion piece to just remember all of that stuff. Like minor characters that like you've only seen for a few episodes, you might forget their names. This is a great way to remember it again. So there's Ellis, the Cursed Caldera, Lujane, of course, the Moon Nexus, you know, what to eat when you're on the run, the Sea Captain guy, of course. You know, Rayla hates water, Into the Storm. And then this is another thing that makes it so weird about the season 3 stuff, is like constantly throughout the entire book they're getting across this idea that like Callum wants to connect to the Sky Arcanum. He knows he has a connection to Sky Magic, but he hasn't done it yet. So the book is leading you down to the direction that it is only covering season 2, because like right at the end, like I think it's like, what is it? Yeah, like pretty much like second last page is him telling you about his discovery of what the Sky Arcanum is. So it's like, oh, so the book was only really covering the first 2 seasons. But then there is like the whole like last third of the book is all about Zadia, which is only season 3 really. So it's kind of like, what? Like, what is with the setting of this book? It's so odd. Because like, again, yeah, we're on page 90 here and we're already talking about Zadia, which, you know, very end of season 2, of course, Callum gets into, but you know, he has to talk about some of the stuff from before, like the breach and so on. But then there's very clear references to season 3, which we'll get into. This is definitely one of the coolest pages in the book, actually. Elves of Zadia covers all the different types of elves, even the ones we haven't seen yet. So Moonshadow elves we're familiar with, Sunfire elves we're familiar with, Star Touch elves we're familiar with through Aravos, but here's sort of Callum's like representation of that. Tidebound elves, I don't actually remember hearing that as the name before for them, but it's very cool to see what the design for the kind of ocean, the water magic elves is like. Similarly, there's a sketch of what an actual Earthblood elf looks like, which is fairly cool, in addition to, you know, another Skywing elf there. So you know, it just shows us that we still have a long way to go. Like, there's 2 whole species of elves that we really haven't seen yet, and then one of the other ones we've only seen 1 character from, and so on. So that's fairly cool. Runan, there's a page on Runan, of course, and again it gets across, you know, Runan and his husband Athari helped raise Rayla even before her parents left to join the Dragon Guard, and you have a nice, really cute sketch there of Runan helping a very young Rayla to dual wheel sticks, so that's pretty cool. Yes, there's a page on Athari, and then some of the other stuff relating to the Moonshadow Elves. We cut across to the Sunfire Elves and Luxaria and the Sunforge, which again is stuff that we really only properly got to see in Season 3, which almost gives me the impression that this book was meant to be a sort of prelude to Season 3 and was meant to include a few references that would help give context when you see Season 3 rather than going all in. But, you know, it's fine. Yeah, next is the page on Janai, and there's an interesting note from Amaya about Janai. You know, he talks about the heat being mode of, like, you know, when Sunfire Elves become angry, they can power up into heat being mode. Their skin glows with actual molten lava, and they become super strong and can walk through fire. Amaya adds to the point, "You're right, heat is one aspect of the sun, but so is light. While it's rare, some Sunfire Elves have a light being mode that allows them to heal others. Now you know." That seems pretty cool. I don't remember ever hearing that in the show. Maybe it is something, but I don't really remember it. And yeah, you have the Queen and stuff like that. The Translator even, who again was like, that was Season 3. Nyx was a Season 3 character as well. So it's like, what is this doing? Like, this is all told. This stuff about Season 3 right here is all told before we get to the Sky Arcanum, which was like, what, like the end of Season 1 or 2? No, 2. I get so confused because, you know, ultimately we've covered 3 seasons of The Dragon Prince, but it's really altogether just like one big season. 3 books make up 1 season because it's only 27 episodes so far we've got. And a lot of shows do 26 in a season. Here's a page on Aravos, which, again, Callum actually notes here that, you know, like, one time I found an old book that had a picture of him in it, but the moment I looked at it, the picture and his name disappeared. And it's talked about, like, other people don't want to talk about him with me. And then Callum was able to remember this stuff and copy it all out. And you have this kind of mysterious page about Aravos that you can probably translate at some point because it relates to, like, some of the forms of magic and so on. There's pages about, like, the different animals. The Magma Titan is included there. They cover stuff on dragons, including an interesting fact here that I didn't quite know about before of, like, dragons who have extra deep connections to the primal sources are called archdragons. They're massively huge and powerful. Zim's dad was an archdragon, and Zim will one day become one too. So that's pretty cool. He also mentions there are other smaller dragons than archdragons, and there's like a cloud wyvern is a type of sky dragon, but it's not as powerful or big as Zim's dad was. They can speak, they live for a very long time, and again, like before, they only lay eggs every like a few centuries and so on. So there we get the name of the dragon that we saw over the course of like Season 2 and 3, Pyra. Fairly interesting. Yeah, we get the page on the King of the Dragons, Avazandum. Pretty cool. Sol Regum gets a page up next. Zubeia, I told you about that before. The Storm Spire, which again is like, there's the Season 3 screenshot of her parents, you know, watching over the egg, which is fairly late Season 3 as well. I think it's like the second or third last episode. And then randomly, really cool page here that I think is a setup for like Season 4. We get introduced to the Archdragon of Earth, which is Rex Igneous. So this is the like equivalent for Earth of Sol Regum and Avazandum. And obviously we know Book 4 is called Earth unless they change things. But it just says here, Rayla told me that Rex Igneous is an Archdragon of Earth. Neither of us have met him, and it's possible we never will, since he lives deep beneath a mountain and only emerges above ground every 100 years or so. But he seems so intriguing. She described him to me, and I drew him here. And it's just got across the idea of like, oh, Rayla's also never seen him. so she can't really confirm if the drawing is accurate or not. But it says here, rumor has it that Rex Igneous can sometimes be appeased if he is presented with extraordinary food that he's never tried before. Dragons are weird and awesome. So that's going to be very fun to see a big earth dragon, I assume, in the next season. Then we get into magic, which again, you know, there's all the different kind of runes for magic. You know, sun, moon, sky, stars, ocean, earth. And again, a lot of them we haven't seen a lot of. We've seen sky, we've seen sun magic, moon magic. Star magic is still very vague. We don't know a lot about earth magic, the same. And pretty much the same with the ocean as well. So that's fairly cool. And then, yeah, probably one of the coolest sections of the book is this one, where we get a page on each of the forms of magic. And it covers like a basic description of it. When is the magic the strongest? The magic that Callum has seen from this type, and then also words that Callum would associate with that type of magic. So for moon, he says, you know, it's strongest during the full moon. He's seen Lujane's illusions, Rayla's assassin's binding, the moonstone path, the lotus flowers, and so on. And he described illusion, love, charm, private, deep secrets, manipulation, death, reflection, appearances, and duality associated with the moon. With sky magic, he says that it's the strongest during a storm, and he's seen like Aspero, Fulminous, you know, Skywing Elves and stuff like that, and he associates lightness, quickness, agility, cleverness, vision, potential, freedom, perspective with it. Sun magic, the magic is strongest when the sun is highest. He's seen the Sunforge blades and so on, and he associates energy, fury, intensity, optimism, teaching, warmth, charisma, revealing, truth, honesty, leadership, and guiding light with sun magic. Earth magic is, it says here, it's the magic is strongest when you're deep underground. And he says, no, I've seen no earth magic yet, but I wonder if all those amazing plants I saw in the Zadian forest are connected to the earth primal source. He associates these words with it: strength, endurance, stubbornness, deep history, patience, healing, growth, and balance. So they're teasing that earth is kind of very mysterious. Ocean magic, similarly so. It's strongest at high tide, and he just notes that potentially the only source of water magic he's seen has been the fish from, I think, like season 1. And he says flexibility, transformation, flow, surface level versus depth, navigation, and awareness is what he associates with them. And once again, there's another sort of illustration of one of the ocean elves. What did they say? Tideborn elves earlier on in the book? Let me just get that specific. Tide-bound elves is what they're called. So that's interesting. Star magic, which is the one I'm most interested in, it says here, when is the magic the strongest? Question mark, question mark, question mark. It says here, to sum it up, star magic is sometimes called celestial magic or cosmic magic. It draws on the vast and timeless power of the cosmos. Honestly, I've heard that star magic can be a little out there, sort of hard to understand. Star mages are extremely rare. Only one star mage may have been born in generations. And he says, I do have one connection to star magic, the rune cube I found in the Banther Lodge. I have more notes on that coming up because I'm discovering new things about it all the time. And he associates vision, truth, intelligence, otherworldly, destiny, wishes, mysterious, timeless, and reality altering with star magic. So it gives you a sense that some of the really weird stuff in the show probably comes down to star magic. And again, the symbol for star magic we've actually seen a bunch of different places, so it's pretty interesting. Next, he covers the rune cube, aka the sort of, what's it called, key of Aravos. An interesting thing here, it says, is that I've been noticing something interesting happens whenever I roll the cube on the ground. It leaves marks pointing in the same direction every time. Once we got to Zadia, the marks started getting longer, but still pointed in the same direction. Is the cube being pulled somewhere? So that's pretty interesting. And just how is this cube, which seems to just point out what type of magic is what, related to Aravos, and like what is it the key to, and so on. So it's fairly interesting. But yeah, the next bit covers like, you know, Aspero, different types of magic, Fulminous, dark magic and stuff like that with Claudia. And interestingly, I didn't actually know this. Dark magic doesn't use draconic language. Instead, it uses human words spoken backwards. I didn't actually know that. maybe someone pointed it out before, but I wasn't aware of that. And she actually explains some of the different spells of like lighting a fire. This one is really useful. Crush an emberback spider and chant backwards, leaping, skipping flames. It will create a small flame that jumps between any targets you think about when saying the spell. So I assume that's why dark magic sounds so weird, because it is literally words spoken backwards. So like leaping, skipping flames is like Semal Gnipis Gniglap or something like that. So it's kind of weird, it's difficult, but I suppose they think about that when they actually have them say dark magic stuff. And yeah, we end on basically the note of like, yeah, Callum Sky Arcanum stuff, which is like, fine, I get it, you end on the part about magic, even though it happened much earlier on in the series, yeah. So overall, like, I'd still recommend it. Like I said, it's a fairly cheap book, but there's a lot of content in it, and there's some new details that we might not know about before. So I would recommend it. Like, for a first proper piece of merchandise, I think it's definitely fairly good, and definitely I'd say it's kind of better than some of the other styles of books that have come out along these lines. Like, it's somewhat similar to the Voltron style books, but I think there's a little bit more to it because there's more pages and so on. The only weakness is just that the vagueness about how much about Season 3 it does or does not cover. That'd be the only real complaint, but in general, strong first book for the Dragon Prince. So the next book, I believe, in terms of like release date schedule, is the Book 1 Moon novelization, which I probably will pick up because they're really highlighting the idea that that book is going to like expand and give more details on the events of Book 1. So I do want to see just how much that means, because I know it's like 300 or 400 pages. I doubt there's too many words on each page, but you know, I appreciate that it's going to be a sort of lengthy style book, so I probably will get that and review it when it comes out. So definitely keep an eye on the channel for you know, when there is new merchandise for the Dragon Prince out, and especially when we finally hear news about Season 4. That's probably like the only thing that holds me back on my channel from, I think, really doing a lot more Dragon Prince content, is just that in my mind, they've yet to properly sort of commit to the full run of the show. That they're teasing that they have ideas up to like Season 8 and onwards, but it seems like the seasons are being confirmed very much one at a time, and the fact that like we basically know next to nothing about like Season 4, apart from the fact that if it happens, it'll be Book 4 Earth, and potentially under a different subheading for the title. It's very up in the air, and so I don't want to commit tons of time on my channel to a show that I'm wondering if Netflix isn't particularly confident in, but we'll see how it goes. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the Dragon Prince Callum's Spellbook. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.